In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Pro Set was the football card set to buy. Pro Set had a good run for 5 years, after which the company spent itself out of business. And you can still find tons of sealed, unopened Pro Set packs out there. Well, it's been, like 30 years, over 30 years now since Pro Set went completely out of business. Now, the story behind Pro Set and its demise is a story of greed and ridiculous business decision making. And you can go check out my other video that's on that subject. And honestly, the company really did deserve to go out of business in a sense. But the cards themselves were a different story. And to be really blunt with you, I like the cards. I mean, you know as well as I do that these cards won't ever be worth much money, but the card designs were really good, the photos were excellent, and the cards have a real professional feel to them. It just feels right to flip through page after page of binders filled with cards that look like this. And every now and then you'll come across something really strange and unusual. And so I decided to come up with this list of the 10 strange and unusual things in that short 5-year run of Pro Set football. Yeah, I know that Leaf has come out with this so-called Pro Set metal card set, but there's no NFL license, the cards look like other garbage. Why do you people buy this crap? No, I'm talking about the real Pro Set football cards, right? The old school stuff, the stuff I remember. Anyway, without any further ado, here are the 10 strange and unusual things from the old school Pro Set. Some of these you can find still in unopened packs, and some of them, good luck. Number 10 are the cards for NFL television announcers. To my knowledge, 1989 Pro Set football was the first major card set for any sport to feature cards for the announcers. And so, just in case you're tired of screaming at Bob Costas to shut up when he's on your television screen, now you can scream at his trading card instead. This was a real creative move on the part of Pro Set, by the way. Football cards before 1989 Pro Set came out were laser focused only on the players. It didn't show you much of the actual culture behind the NFL. Pro Set came out with this lighter and more fan-friendly fun approach, and it really shows. Plus, these cards look great even if Costas is a jerk. And I mean, there's a card for Steve Sable, the NFL Films guy. Dan Dierdorf's card shows a picture of him as a player, and it still looks better than the 1989 cards by the other football companies, even though this was an old picture. Frank Gifford also got a card showing off his skills as a place kicker for the New York Giants. Sure, these cards aren't worth anything, and there are so many of them out there that you could probably wallpaper your house with them if you wanted. But you've got to admit that they look good and that this was a really positive and creative idea on the part of the company. And almost nobody's done this since. Now, there have been a couple of sets here and there that have included some announcer cards, but it's been nothing as big or as all-encompassing as this one in 1989 Pro Set football. Too many people pass over this subset when they think about Pro Set, and it really is about time that the company got, some respect and credit for it, which is why I have it here. Anyway, number 9 on this list is one that you already know about unless you've been living under a rock for decades, or unless you're a kid. Back in summer 1990, the big chase was on for the Vince Lombardi trophy card, which was available in a ratio of 1 in every 40 cases. That would be this card right here in all of its glory, numbered 1 of 10,000. The foil printing makes it almost impossible to scan, but as you can see here, these cards are numbered individually. And it's written wrong. It should be of 10,000, not of 10 million. So I guess that Ludwell Denny couldn't count, whatever. Either that, whoever was doing the writing for him wrote the wrong thing down. I would have written 10K instead of 10M, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, this card has traditionally been considered the biggest draw of all of those overprinted Pro Set packs, and it gives you a really good reason to want to get digging and start just opening wax. It is a really nice card though, and it really makes you feel like you've opened something special. And the card is incredibly condition sensitive, especially the back. This is why high condition graded versions go for a lot of money, especially if you wind up with a high grade. And be careful about buying loose ungraded cards on the secondary market, since there are a lot of counterfeits out there. Now, there's one reason why I listed this card way down at number 9. So some of the stuff that I have above it in this list is not really rare. In fact, some of these cards are actually really common. But there's a lot of stuff that Pro Set did that was just weird. Back in 1989, Pro Set got in trouble for printing this William Perry card. The problem is that the refrigerator wasn't covered by the Players Association, and so Pro Set did not really have a right to print the card in the first place. But they did it anyway. So that's the thing about Pro Set. Like, Lud Denny had this tendency to just print whatever he wanted to print first and then apologize for it later, including in cases where he knew he couldn't do it. So he seems to have understood the history of sports cards. He knew that people were more likely to open packs if they thought that there was something rare, and that collectors would go nuts over short printed cards that had to be like withdrawn because, you know, the card creator broke the rules. And the history behind stuff like this Perry card is actually really sketchy. In theory, there were only 8,000 of these cards printed. But then again, here is a full half sheet of Perry cards, which is pretty strong evidence that Pro Set was printing them even when they weren't supposed to. And so it's probably true that this so-called air card was actually a deliberate marketing gimmick on the part of Pro Set. So Upper Deck was notorious for doing this as well. There are these rumors that Upper Deck printed entire sheets of nothing but the 1989 Dale Murphy Air cards, or nothing but like 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. rookie cards. You've got to be careful when people tell you that some of these junk wax era cards are rare. In some cases, the rare cards were actually printed more heavily than the common cards. You've also got some cards with mistakes in the photos that probably weren't mistakes. And then you've got a crazy number of variations, such as this Fred Washington post-mortem card that is missing the number on the back. Because Pro Set decided to make its set a living set, the company would correct errors as it went along, and the print run was basically infinite. This variation, where the commissioner peers through the Berlin Wall, is only worth a couple of cents. The corrected version, where he poses at the Berlin Wall, is also worth a couple of cents, but you technically need both to get the master set. Anyway, you're going to go crazy trying to collect the full master set, and don't get me started on the eBay scammers telling you that this random card is worth more because it has this pink dot or some stupid thing like that. Pro Set had both underprinted cards and crazy variations, but it also had some really crazy vanity cards, the likes of which we have never seen anywhere else. That would be this card, where CEO Ludwell Denny decided to make a card of himself as the head coach of the New York Giants. The bio on the back is all junk and inside jokes, of course, but the fact that he had the balls to do this is really impressive. And the real crazy thing is that there are not a whole ton of these cards out there. And you knew that that was going to happen, right? Only Pro Set would give you a numbered card that was a total gimmick, one that you couldn't get in packs. I think you had to know somebody who knew somebody to get one of these babies. There are other bizarre Denny cards, like the message on the back of this 1990 Andre Rison. This card includes an apology for not showing that Rison was traded and is actually just an advertisement for their coming mail-only final update set. Oh, and there's also an ad at the bottom for Pro Set bubblegum, which was probably a bad business decision. So here you go, 6 pieces of gum and 8 collector cards. I'm guessing that you probably don't want to touch the gum since it's over 35 years old. Anyway, I'm pretty sure those cards were part of the special Super Bowl 25 Silver Anniversary set. You can also get the whole thing in a nice binder, which is a much better idea than cards with gum stains. So Denny was a marketing genius, I guess. Either that or he was insane. Maybe he was both. Anyway, the next card is one of those crazy cards, the sort that only a company like Pro Set would come out with. I swear, these guys would print anything. Bo knows football, right? And even though it's as common as the common cold, you can still get good money for this baby if it's in good condition. After all, it is a nice looking card. But have you ever seen this Bo Jackson Super Bowl 25 card? Yes, this exists. Yes, this is a real thing. Yes, they really printed it. Yes, it is worth thousands of dollars. It never showed up in packs, however. You've got to know a guy who knows a guy, just like the rest of the real crazy cards. The story is that the company made cards in advance for the teams that might have been in Super Bowl 25 and then destroyed the cards of the losers after they lost. They're all rare, but the Bo Jackson card is the only one that anybody wants. And yeah, that means there's a market inefficiency here and you can do what you want with that information. Bo's card is the only one with a picture different than his base card. And apparently only 16 of these cards have been graded, which makes it one of the rarest cards on this list. You want one of these, right? You want one? You want one? Yeah, good freaking luck you want one. And yeah, this means your 1990 Pro Set Master set is actually incomplete. Sorry to break it to you. You got to get the Raiders and 49ers cards that were never supposed to be printed, bro. Anyway, the next cards are all really common, but there's an interesting story behind them. Back in 1991, Proset made a card for Ty Detmer, the 1990 Heisman Trophy Award winner. Detmer had a stellar year in 1990, of course, and Proset wanted to make sure that it got a card ready for all of the collectors who would want a key rookie. The only problem is that Detmer stayed at BYU for the 1991 season. Yeah, whoops. They weren't supposed to print that card, but, they printed it anyway. Oh, too bad. Lud Denny loved doing stuff like this, of course, but it wasn't exactly legal. This was before NIL, of course, and the problem is that Detmer could not be in a commercial card set while he was still an amateur. It also turns out that Denny hadn't contacted BYU at all to ask for permission. In fact, Detmer had never given his permission either. Proset just sent him a letter saying that they were going to do this, and that was all. Anyway, there were a whole bunch of people who were duped by all of this, actually including my father. So my dad bought a huge stack of these cards back in 1991, I think it was, for a couple bucks each. He heard from somebody that they were short printed and they would be discontinued and that it would be worth a whole bunch of money, 30 years later. These days you can get a whole bunch of these for like $5 on eBay if you really want. They're completely worthless. The thing is that this was a stock photo of Detmer taken during a game. There was no photo shoot. This back photo looks like it was taken from a media guide. Anyway, that same set saw a card for Rocket Ismail, who was a big star for Notre Dame. The idea here was the same. Proset wanted to make a card for these players as soon as possible so that rookie collectors would buy Proset packs. Of course, Ismail was going to the draft, and Proset knew it. Proset just didn't know which team he'd be drafted on. And so the company made up a whole bunch of different cards just in case. And yeah, I'm not making this up. Okay, the first card number 694 went to Russell Maryland of Miami. But of course, it wouldn't make much sense to only have one card 694. They made this Legends Joe Ferguson card as well. And as you can see, it also got number 694. And then there were the draft day cards, which I think you have to count as a subset if you don't want your head to totally explode. Nick Bell of Iowa had number 694. So did Mike Crowell of Nebraska. So did Todd Light of Notre Dame. And then there was Dan McGuire of San Diego State. There was a Rocket card going to the Cowboys. There was one going to the Falcons. And then there was one going to the Patriots. So that makes 9 different cards, all with number 694. Did I mention that Lud Denny was insane? I mean, who makes a card set like this? I guess the nice thing is that your 1991 Pro set, master set will be different than like your neighbor's set, since that number has 9 different variations. It just boggles my mind. Anyway, the story here is that Proset was scrambling to figure out what to do. The problem is that there was a deal sending the Patriots' number 1 pick to the Cowboys, and the other contingency was that the Falcons might also somehow go first. Meanwhile, the Russell Maryland contingency was there just in case the Rocket signed with Toronto. The official story is that the Russell Maryland card was the official number 694, I think. Meanwhile, the Players Association was battling with Proset in court over these shady practices. And, all of the money that had to go to the lawyers for all these court battles probably explains why the company went out of business so quickly. So if Lud Denny and his band of merry, insane men simply, followed the rules and stopped doing really sketchy stuff, Proset would probably still be making cards today. Anyway, the next card on this list is one that most of you have probably never heard of. This card is one of the rarest Proset cards of all, so rare that people thought for years that it was only a rumor. Card number 666, what a great number, is for Steve Young, Vice President of Proset, and the biography on the back is pretty sketchy. Rumor has it that the print run might be as low as 10 or even lower. And this is another one of those cards you can only get if you know somebody who knew somebody at the company. Anyway, good luck trying to get a copy of this one. Nobody sells this card because nobody owns this card. Of course, sticking someone named Steve Young on the Cowboys is a class move. And we all know what 666 means. You can tell that this guy was up to no good. Like I said, your 1990 master set is not a true master set. Not unless you figure out a way to get one of these babies. Anyway, Proset was really bad at marketing its own product, despite the fact that you could find these cards in literally every imaginable store. The reason why, by the way, is because they used a tobacco company to be their distribution. I'm not kidding. So you can buy your pack of cigarettes along with your pack of Proset cards. Anyway, there were certain limited edition inserts in some of these packs that existed but nobody talked about for some stupid reason. And this is probably because Lud Denny was too busy printing 9 different versions of card number 694 to talk about the stuff that collectors actually cared about. There were 3 autographed cards in 1991 Pro Set packs, each limited to 500 copies only. 2 of them were for Lawrence Taylor, and the third one was this Legends Ozzie Newsome card. And the funny thing about these cards is that people don't seem to realize that they were actually inserts. Like I said, Pro Set did a really bad job of trying to sell this stuff to the public, and it's really confusing after the fact since the LT Pro Set cards with later signatures are also a thing. In other words, these cards looked exactly the same as the normal cards in the set, except with those signatures on top, but you can find Lawrence Taylor signature cards in different colors of ink that look very similar. And because of that, these are not really worth that much money. Of course, 1991 was the first year that Upper Deck made football cards, which is probably why Pro Set decided to go for the autographs. Upper Deck generally did a better job of advertising its autographs right on the packs themselves. You literally could not open a pack of 1991 Upper Deck football without reading about the 2500 Joe Montana autograph inserts, for example. Meanwhile, all Pro Set advertised was a really crappy t-shirt. Yeah, I don't get it. You want to throw in chase cards, yeah. I mean, the whole freaking hobby these days is basically nothing but chase cards since the base sets are all freaking AI slop. Anyway, we can talk about that later on. That really pisses me off. But why would you make a really, really rare chase card if you don't tell people about it? I mean, it's insane. Anyway, the Montana Upper Deck card was kind of a gimmick, but it's still pretty cool. Upper Deck also put out an autographed Joe Namath card, if that's more down your alley. In response, Pro Set had 3 autograph cards in the 1992 set. There was this one for Emmitt Smith, there was this legendary card for Eric Kramer, and then there was this Jerry Rice card numbered out of 980. The Smith and Kramer cards were numbered to 1,000, although the number is on the back in marker. These are limited cards, sure, but there's not much demand for them since most collectors don't even know that they exist and are official. Once again, Pro Set carefully avoided saying anything to advertise these chase cards, figuring that collectors would somehow magically just know about them. Anyway, I'm getting some of that, Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory vibes here from Pro Set. Anyway, the next card is a lot more famous, though the earliest and scarcest versions were only available to dealers. And that means that this was another one of those really sketchy Pro Set things. Gotta love them. Only Ludwell Denny could turn freaking Santa Claus into a scandal. Pro Set started an early tradition of making cards for Santa Claus every single year. Now, these later Santa Claus cards are really lame, but the earlier you go, the better the cards look. Oh, and here you go, Ludwell Denny dressed up as a freaking elf. Yeah, Denny sure was a character, wasn't he? Anyway, the 1989 and 1990 versions of Santa Claus are really the only ones you want to get. I think the artwork on the 1991 version is okay, but then you have to deal with, Ludwell Denny as a fat elf on the back. You do yourself a favor and stick with the earlier variants. The 1990 card was short printed and features another picture of Ludwell Denny there on the wall. It's got this cool poem on the back and the card is numbered 1990, which is a nice touch. This is a pretty good one. Anyway, the best of the Santa cards was this one from 1989, which was legitimately short printed. The bio on the back is hilarious and the card is really well done and attractive, even though I think they used Ludwell Denny's photo again for the artwork. Now, the other Santa Claus cards are pretty cheap and easy to find. But that 1989 card is legitimately scarce and it will cost you a whole bunch of money. And the prices are only going up. It's hard to find, but if you can get a copy that grades out as a PSA 10, you're golden. These babies go for a pretty penny. Of course, you don't have to get one in perfect condition. But I mean, if you're spending big money on freaking Pro Set junk wax, you might as well go for the home run, right? You see, one of the biggest problems with Pro Set is that it developed a reputation for making rare specialty cards that only went out to the special friends. That's corruption, right? You're basically printing free money and giving it directly to your buddies. Upper Deck was accused of doing this, so much so that a journalist wrote an entire book about it. It's called Card Sharks. I got it somewhere back here. But Pro Set did it more often and more flagrantly, and yet nobody remembers that part. Anyway, the number 1 bizarre card in this list is actually a whole set, and you're never going to be able to afford this one. You just give up now, don't even try. Back in 1990, Pro Set partnered together with inner city schools in Cincinnati to make a rare set of educational football cards. These cards were divided up into weekly lessons, and each of them came in packets with one of these header cards. An unopened pack looks something like this, and these are a lot rarer than you think. These went out to 4th graders in 29 different schools in Cincinnati, and they included 25 cards per week for 15 straight weeks. And the kids who were lucky enough to be part of the program knew that it was pretty scarce since they got a letter from the city of Cincinnati telling them so. Now, doesn't this thing sound kind of, sketchy to you? So you got a sports card company, which itself is a really sketchy line of business, but that company is now printing cards for a public school. They're printing freaking football cards for a public school. And so they've got some deal with like the city council or something like that. And these cards are supposed to be educational, like for some reason, right? Do you look at football cards and say, oh boy, I'm glad I learned something from that. Anyway, this is one of those extremely rare variation sets, and it's almost impossible to find for obvious reasons. So there was this binder that I think all the kids got, though the details are really sketchy. They also got this letter from Ludwell Denny, who probably should have told them to hold on to the cards for 35 years so they can make a few $1,000. The students got this game plan. The teachers also got their own game plan. Now, the cards themselves look identical to 1990 Pro Set cards. However, the backs have some questions on them, like this one asking you to add together the yards gained by two different running backs. And that's supposed to convince kids to want to do math? Anyway, the whole thing was really a stupid gimmick. The worst part about these is the only way to tell them apart from the normal Pro Set cards is to look at the back to see if they have the school questions. So you've got Joe Montana helping you learn Roman numerals. You've got Barry Sanders helping us learn how sundials work, and isn't that relevant to the NFL? And then you've got John Elway helping you add together 5 different sets of numbers. The vast majority of these cards are some sort of stupid math problem that uses football stats. And that's the biggest problem with this whole concept. There's only so much you can teach kids with like a football card. I don't know, maybe you could have used like the weight and the max acceleration speed of the defensive linemen to teach the kids about the physics of like in-game collisions with the quarterback and the concussions that come as a result of that, right? Go ask Steve Young how you do the math on that. Anyway, there's only one other scandal here, one that nobody really talks about, and one that created one of the rarest and most legendary football cards of all time. Alright, so this card is Eric Dickerson of the Indianapolis Colts. This Pro Bowl card was short printed because Pro Set was not supposed to print it. Does that sound familiar? Anyway, as Dr. Baseball tells us in this syndicated column from August 1990, Pro Set was known for sticking rarities in the packs. This included the Dickerson cards, which Ludwell Denny allegedly tried to stop at the last moment. Yeah, I'm sure he did. He knew that some cards slipped into packs, but not how many. And so because of this, a PSA 9 will run you a little under $100. So maybe that card is not quite as rare as we once thought it was, though my guess is that the truth is most people just don't know that it exists and that it's a thing. Anyway, so what does all of this have to do with that fact Cincinnati said? Well, it turns out that there was also a Dickerson card made for the fact set, except, of course, they weren't supposed to make it, and they kind of didn't make it. Anyway, rumor has it that a few copies of card number 338 surfaced around a decade ago. Now, this Dickerson card is bizarre since it looks like the educational part was pasted on the back. Also, the educational question is about Kevin Butler, not Eric Dickerson. Butler, by the way, got a different educational question on the back of his card. And this blog post from a few years ago sums it up when it says that there have basically been no sales of this card over like the past decade. So this card and the Steve Young 666 card are the two Pro Set holy grails. But the reason why I've got Dickerson at number 1 is because of that whole bizarre fact thing. The thing is that Pro Set really could have built up a lot of goodwill if it actually had like an educational plan. Instead, they decided to write a whole bunch of sloppy school questions at the last second and tried to use this to brainwash kids into wanting to buy more Pro Set product at overpriced, they're printing so much of this stuff, I don't even know you could underprice it, right? It's not worth anything. Anyway, the timing behind all of this too was really, really bad. The initiative was front page news in early October 1990 in Cincinnati. But the problem is that the Reds in baseball were in the playoffs that year, and the newspaper was all about baseball. Now, the cards were not actually part of any curriculum, no surprise there, and Ludwell Denny estimated that they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make, which is really funny. They also decided to evaluate the program after 15 weeks were up, and the fact that this never happened again tells you just how the evaluation went. Now, the funniest thing about this is that there were no follow-up articles in the Cincinnati Post. Meanwhile, the Cincinnati Enquirer, they didn't even cover the event at all. They just ignored it. In other words, all of that goodwill that Lud Denny was hoping to get from this supposed hundreds of thousands of dollar program that probably cost the company like $200, none of that goodwill came at any point in time. It just didn't exist. Nobody paid attention and the program completely failed, just like ProSet itself completely failed just a couple years later. Anyway, this gives you at least a window into the wild and wacky world that was ProSet cards. I mean, even cards that were supposed to be rare, like these ProSet Gazette Emmitt Smith cards, were printed in such ridiculous numbers that you can find them just about anywhere. The whole ProSet experience was just wild and unpredictable, and Lud Denny is up there with P.T. Barnum in terms of the circus that he ran. And I don't know about you guys, but I've got to get my hands on one of these Little Mermaid cards. Anyways, so there you have it. That's your 10 bizarre and unusual ProSet cards and subsets that actually do exist. Now, I will be honest with you, I talk a lot of crap about this. I really do like the base sets here. I love the nice photography. I love the design. I would buy like 1,000 packs of freaking ProSet garbage rather than buying a single modern football card pack, because the modern cards are garbage, right? ProSet stuff, maybe there's a ton of it out there, who cares, right? It looks really nice. I really like these cards. But seriously, Lud Denny and ProSet the company, that's about as sketchy as you can possibly get.